Welcome to Time of Death. This video is for informational purposes and in no way meant to glorify or condone violence. In today's video, we'll be discussing the murder of Ricardo Rivera Jr. Rivera was fatally shot Thursday, March 13, 2008, in the 300 block of East 80th Street in the Florence area of South Central LA, according to LA County coroner records. Pedro R. and Marco Sanchez were subsequently arrested and charged with the murder. The following is the evidence at trial. On the evening of March 13, 2008, Jorge G. and some friends were standing outside his apartment on 80th Street in LA when Jorge saw the defendant, whom he recognized as a student at his high school. Jorge had once seen the defendant fighting at school and heard him claim to be a member of Southgate Bay 13. The defendant approached the group with a much shorter male, who was later identified as 13-year-old Pedro R. Both defendant and Pedro were wearing hooded sweatshirts, and Jorge testified that they had the hoods over their heads. Jorge heard Pedro say that he and the defendant were about to do something and about to kill somebody. The defendant was wearing a doctor's glove in his right hand and had a gun in his waistband. The defendant held the gun once in a while. When a car passed by, the defendant would put his hand on the gun. Pedro's hands were concealed. Jorge and his friends eventually went inside the apartment, and then they heard a shot. They went back outside and saw a body laying on the ground near Town Avenue. The victim, 18-year-old Ricardo Rivera, was a member of Kansas Street 13. On the night of the murder, his sister Kelly Rivera was standing outside her house with a friend and Ricardo. She saw the defendant and Pedro passing in front of her house over and over. She identified the defendant in court and testified that she had seen him the day before the murder. She recognized Pedro because he had fought with her brother 2 days earlier. At some point, the defendant and Pedro stopped walking and stood next to a tree near the corner of the street. Ricardo was leaning against a brick wall when out of nowhere, he got shot in the head. Kelly identified the defendant in a field show-up later that night and was sure it was him. She identified the defendant at the preliminary hearing, and she also identified Pedro from a photographic six-pack lineup. Ricardo's autopsy results showed that he suffered a through-and-through gunshot wound to his head. According to the medical examiner, a bullet shot from a short distance has a better chance of exiting the victim's body. The medical examiner opined that a .357 Magnum could propel a bullet through someone's head if the range of fire was not far away. The day after the murder, the police searched Pedro's house and recovered the .357 revolver in the bedroom, a yellow notebook with gang writing on it, and a latex glove in the wastebasket. The gun had a 6-round capacity and had 5 live rounds and 1 expended round. Defendant Sanchez lived next door to Pedro. His house was also searched, and the police recovered a shoebox with gang writing on it and numerous papers with writing consistent with Southgate Bay 13. Detective Derek O'Malley of the Southgate Police Department testified as a gang expert. He was familiar with Southgate Bay 13, which had approximately 14 members and was a rival of Kansas Street. Detective O'Malley knew Pedro, whose moniker was Demon. Pedro had admitted to Detective O'Malley that he was a member of Southgate Bay 13. The notebook recovered from Pedro's house was filled with gang writing and gang monikers. According to Detective O'Malley, Bay stands for Badass Youngsters or Barrio Ardmore Youngsters. Detective O'Malley opined that Pedro was an active member of Southgate Bay 13 and defendant Sanchez was also a member of the gang. Following the trial, Marco Sanchez was found guilty of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder, including a gun and gang enhancement. The court sentenced the defendant to 50 years to life in state prison. Ricardo Rivera Jr. was 18 years old at the time of death.